So, like it's 11, so I could leave?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to call this meeting to order. If you'd please join me and stand up and put on the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There was nobody that signed up for public comment. Is there any members of the public that would like to make comment at this time? And I don't see any. The first thing we have on the agenda is information. And as I said at the last meeting, from time to time, we may start off our meeting with 10 or 15-minute presentation on a variety of subjects that may be of interest to the board. So we're starting tonight. We're very happy to have with us Ross Longini, who is going to talk about public awareness of public school funding. This kind of ties in with what's coming up in the next year for us as far as levies and bond issues come. What this is not going to be is a discussion of our current levies or future levies for the school district, nor is it about our school budget. It's more general in nature, and we welcome him. And with that, I'll let Ross introduce himself.
Well, thanks, Terry.
Thank you.
Ross Longini. I've been in Sandpoint for about 7 years now. Came out of the Midwest. I'm an engineer by training. Spent my career in medical products companies, and the last almost 10 years now I've been doing consulting. That's slowly transitioned from consulting to startup medical device companies to in the nonprofit world. And why am I here? It's because I've been on the board of the Panhandle Alliance for Education, or PAVE, for the last couple of years, and we undertook a survey this spring and wanted to share some of the information of that survey with the board. So that's a brief introduction. And I will dive right in. So as I mentioned, the Panhandle Alliance for Education has did a survey this last spring. It's been part of a bigger visioning process that we've been going through and that I've been facilitating for PAVE. And so we wanted to go out and get some information from the public on that and see what the community believe about certain things having to do with school financing, with the value of education, why do we educate, and so on. So this is a survey that we did here just locally. I'm going to go through these relatively quickly, but if you have questions, just holler. So a couple of the survey statistics, we were able to get 566 responses. 84% of the people that started the survey completed them, which is about standard for a survey of this type. We were able to do it pretty cost effectively. We really wanted to go out and make sure that we had a broader array of people taking the survey. So we used many different methods to reach people. Certainly we used the PAVE database of emails that we have in contacts. In addition to that, we went out to clubs like the Rotary and asked if they would email out to their people. I'm part of the chairman of the Sandpoint North Club, so we have a couple other people in that, so we sent it out to them. We went to a couple of businesses, Lighthouse for instance, and said, hey, would you mail out your people? We went into a number of different media sources, periodicals for instance. We went through the Bee and Sandpoint Online and the Reader, and we put hot links in all of those. So as you can see, we got a pretty broad range of people that were either retired business owner, educators, and so on. And we really wanted to make sure they weren't all PAVE affiliated people. So the first section that we're going to go through is really around what is the knowledge, the community's knowledge about how education is funded. And then we're going to get into a couple of different aspects of what they believe about education. So the first slide, what we're looking at here is what do they believe or what do they understand about the per student funding amounts. So this is a little bit hard to read, we have to explain it a little bit, but we asked people like, in the United States, where do you think Idaho, bars on the left here, what do you think Idaho ranks in per student funding? Probably everybody in the room knows that we're ranked about 49 of all the states. So that would be represented by, this was all the states, that would be represented by about 4% or so. but that was the number of states on that axis. And the median response to that question was close. Most people know that we're funded quite low as compared to other states. But the range of response, as you can see, the range went from we were funded the worst to we were funded almost the best. So the range was quite large, but the median was close to the average. So the takeaway from this is that our community largely knows that funding on a per student basis is pretty low in Idaho. Then we asked, how do they think LPOSD is funded compared to the rest of Idaho, all of the school districts in Idaho? And here, the actual is that we're ranked about 68th percentile of all the school districts in Idaho in the last information I was able to get from the school district. And the median response was that we're ranked lower than we actually are, but you can see the range was, the median would suggest that it was kind of a guessing game, because the range goes from 0 to 100, from where the lowest funded to the highest funded, and the range was kind of close to the middle. So that to me just indicates that it was mostly people going out.
So, can I interrupt you here?
Sure.
Funding, are you looking at total funding from all sources? You just take our budget divided by our enrollment?
This is, yeah, so this is per student funding, which is coming off of the Lisa Hall's spreadsheet of the total number of funding divided by enrollment. I didn't calculate these numbers, I got it from the LPOSD website actually. Okay, then the next question we asked, we wanted to understand, do people know where the funding sources come from? And we just basically broke it down into 3 sources of funding. There's a local component of funding, usually levied through property taxes. There's a state component of funding that we're all well aware of, and there's a federal component of funding. And so this just shows what percentage of all of these different demographic groups that I showed you earlier, what percentage got the answer correct for what it is either in Idaho or nationally. And we'll get into what the real numbers are. But generally speaking, what this tells me, the 79% either answered it incorrectly or didn't answer it at all. Most people answered the question incorrectly. You can see that kind of no matter what group we're looking at, people don't know. Just ask 1, 2, and 3. Is it state the most, federal the least? What is it? Most people, 80% don't know. Just to rank 3 things in order. So it tells us something, that there's a lack of maybe awareness. This chart, I think, wasn't in the survey, but this is just to give you some rough statistics based on things I pulled from the U.S. Census Bureau. In the United States, federal funding is roughly $1,000 per student per year. The states fund roughly $6,500 per student per year, and the local is about a little over $6,000. So for a total of like $13,000 per student per year is the national average, all in national average. And when we look at Idaho, not LPOSD, Idaho, you can see that the state is a little bit less than the average of a state, but not a lot less. The federal is about the same. And the big gap is that in Idaho is that the local component, which is again normally assessed through property taxes, the local component of property tax provides $2,000, whereas in the national average it's about $6,000. So that's the big gap. And that's an awareness issue that I think isn't out. People don't know that. I didn't know that until I looked into this. And clearly in the previous question when we asked in the survey, they didn't know that either. 80% didn't know that. So then we tried to ascertain in the survey, do people think that our method here in Idaho of coming up with the funds that are the local component, in the previous chart they would be the local component of funds, which are assessed through property taxes, we do through a supplemental operations and maintenance levy that we all know about very well. So we asked how many states do that, where it typically goes to 0 every other year. Every 2 years you got to vote it back in, and it's a big part of the operational budget of the school district. Like how many states do that? Well, about 6% of the people got this question right. 94% thought most states do that. And the reality is Idaho is actually the only state that does it this way, that whereas every other year, and it's a huge percentage, like 30% in our case, of the budget. We're the only state that does that. So it's an unusual way to do it. And then we asked some questions about, do you believe that increasing educational funding typically improves academic performance? This was on general funding. People said, yeah, we think it does. On facilities funding, they said, yeah, probably. So this was just a beliefs standpoint. There's some data, very scattered data on general funding, some pretty decent data on facilities funding that would indicate that it is better to spend more. Which sources of funding listed below do you think go into facilities? So we want to understand it. We just had a facilities levy a couple of years ago, and did people get it? Did they understand that who's paying for the facility itself? Well, most people understood that the local property tax pays for the school facilities in Idaho, in our community. But a lot of people thought the state pays for part of it. A lot of people thought the federal government pays for part of it, and so on. So still some unawareness there. Of course, we know that it's all assessed locally. And then we went into another part of the survey, and it was really around what do people believe about funding of education. So we asked them, should educational funding these are careful on the words here, per LPOSD student be increased or decreased, or stay the same, or actually increased, keep the same and decreased. And then we asked another question, similar question, should LPOSD increase spending? And you see a little bit of a switch from the top one. But nonetheless, the vast majority of people believe that funding should be increased. And then we asked in this one, some of those, when I imported the words, some of them got truncated. So where should LPOSD increase spending? You'll see that there's a lot of, if you could read it, you'd see a lot going to teachers. So this first one is increase teachers' pay. This one is improve the quality of our education materials and programs. This one is provide more teacher development opportunities. This one's increase the number of teachers, to reduce class size. Point being is that a lot of the community believes that we should put a lot of money into the classroom. I mean, it should be into the teachers, the programs, and the facilities. So that's how they asked, when we asked if you think they should increase spending, where. Then there was a question about, do you believe that LPOSD should make spending cuts? 85% of the people said no, but we wanted to get at those 15% of the people that said yes, and say, well, where would you make cuts? So you'll see this is a little bit interesting in that the other category, typically in surveys when you put other and then you have people who have to write stuff in, they don't do it. But keep in mind this is only 15% of people said cut, so it's a small number. Okay.
So the 15% are the only ones answering this?
Yes, that's the only ones answering this. Good point. And frankly, almost over half of the write-ins, because again, these were write-ins, over half of them were reduced administrative pay.
That's 75 people-ish.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep, good point on it. Yeah. So, consolidate schools, reduce extracurricular activities, and reduce, that's a small number.
Yeah, what is that blue one?
What's the blue one?
Reduce teachers
Teacher
and,
And staff. I would imagine reduced number of teachers and staff. That's what I would read that as.
Yeah, I mean,
And the bottom was just reduced.
yeah, reduce
Opportunity.
something.
number
Of opportunities.
Reduce anything there.
reduce
Fill in
teachers,
the blank.
it's actually reduce teacher and administrative pay.
oh, okay.
So,
And then what's the bottom one? Reduce the number?
reduce the number of teachers.
Oh, yeah, geez.
So this was pay.
That was like 2 people.
This was pay. This was, it was
Yeah.
2 actually. This
Yeah.
is 4 people.
Right,
It's not
yeah.
Yeah.
So, Okay, then we asked some questions about the value of education. So we said, we gave them really hard choices in the survey. We said, look at these. We're going to give them education, jobs, housing. This is affordable housing, healthcare, and infrastructure, roads and bridges. So we thought, how is anybody ever going to be able to go 3 years in the morning? We forced a rank order on that one. And education came on the top of the list. So, I mean, I was pleased because I thought, man, jobs, healthcare. I mean, we knew this was kind of a ridiculous question because it's so hard, but we thought, let's throw it out there. It's a bit of a risk. And it was really interesting to see how it came out. Mm-hmm. And then we asked, why? Why do we educate people? What are the benefits? So in the last slide, they said education is really important for our community. Why do we educate? And it's about jobs. I mean, the first one is really about jobs. The rest of these, how to learn, how to navigate life's problems, achieving success. But ultimately, you can see that top bar there is significant, and it's about jobs. So a strong connection in our community between education is highly valued, and it's because you're getting somebody ready for the workforce. So that's in a nutshell what we learned in our survey. And just to give you a little bit of a commercial, what we're going to do with some of this, with the Pan Alliance for Education, is we're going to start doing a little bit more communications just about the facts. And we think there's an opportunity here to bring the level of knowledge and available information up in our community, and we're going to undertake. Can't do a big effort at it, but we'll do a small effort at it. Lonnie, you have a question?
Yeah, just, do you know, I know you know the demographics of your respondents in terms of retired, have kids, not have kids. Do you have any idea of geographic demographics? Well,
yeah, we do.
that's a lot of ethics.
They're mostly Sandpoint.
Okay.
We asked zip codes.
Okay.
And so of the 560, well, frankly, the zip code question was the last question, or near the last question, so it might have been the last question in the survey. So we had 475 people get that far.
Okay.
And of those 475, a little over 300 were 83864.
Okay.
Okay, and then the next biggest, almost 100, was, I think it's Sagal, right? 83860.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, believe it or not, the third biggest category with about 40 was people that got it that don't live in any of the 7 we gave them to choose from. So, I don't know what they did. But maybe they're part-time. I'm thinking they're part-time residents.
Yeah.
But then we had 83, 836, 56, 01, 47, 11, which I don't even remember where all those are anymore.
3/6 is Oakland, 1's Clarkport.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
We didn't have a good turnout in Clarkport. We had 2.
Well, I certainly appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I think the takeaway from this is, one, is the residents value education very highly. 2, they do not understand how it's funded or where the money comes from. And 3, the real shortfall isn't the federal government or the state, but it's down at the county level.
Yeah, that's
I think that's
excellent.
Do you have any idea about, education is funded by property tax nationwide, but how many states are like us, or it's local option, and how many are these state mandated property taxes with equalizations?
I don't know the answer to exactly that question, even though I have looked at that data. I just don't have it with me right now. Very few states have it where it's comes up for election all the time. Most states, it is an option, but you vote it in as a millage rate, and then the millage rate only gets voted on if it changes. So if you say, like, you're going to give whatever the millage rate is, 1% of assessed value every year goes to the school, it stays 1% forever. When assessed values go up, it goes up. When it goes down, it goes down. That's how it is, I think, in most states. That's how it is I've lived in 6 states now. That's how it's been in every state I've lived in so far. But yeah, we're the only one that does it like this. Now, there are other states. Washington is an example. Sean, I know, can talk to that have, there's a number of states that have like supplemental levies that are voted on periodically, usually not every 2 years. And often, when they do have them, they're for things like extracurricular activities. Not in Washington, but in this, I think Philadelphia is that way maybe. There's a couple of states I saw east that were that way, but very, very few.
Well, Washington just changed theirs, I mean, as a result of litigation. I mean, it's mandated that the state has to fund basic education across the state.
Well,
Not an
I
equal
don't,
formula.
I don't think we're gonna change the state law as far as how it's funded. We kind of have what we have, so.
And
But it
certainly
is
our
interesting.
point is about information, is trying to just get
Yeah.
information.
No, it's good. Yeah.
Yeah, we're not a lobbying group, so that's not what we'll be doing as paid. But we do believe we have a little bit of a pulpit to communicate.
Well, thank you.
Thank you.
very much.
Yeah,
Thanks,
thanks,
Ron.
Ross.
We appreciate it.
very
Yep.
much.
Thanks for having me.
Moving on, the next items are action items that we have. And we have several new certifications that we need to approve. The first one is the alternate authorization teacher to new certification, Jeanette Hunter, Sandpoint. Do you want to bring that up, or do you want to?
Just a question for the board. I asked our administrators to be very clear on each one of these. Do you want us to go over each one individually? Or have you read them, or what? would
We've
you
read
all
them. I don't think it's necessary. to
We've
go
read
over
them.
it.
Okay,
Yeah.
so maybe we'll just,
Unless any of the board members may have a question
Well,
about any of them.
Why don't we make the motion, and then if people have questions,
Yeah.
we can call for.
We'll just start with call for a motion, and if.
So I
that
move
person-
I move to approve the alternate authorization teacher new certification for Jeanette Hunter.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the new certification for Jeanette Hunter. Discussion? No discussion, we'll call for a vote. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. That motion carries.
Moving
Next-
down, I move to approve the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Dalton Hawkins.
Second that.
Been moved and seconded that we approve new certification for Dalton Hawkins. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Yes, we're ready.
I'll move to approve the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Renee Nigan.
And Negan.
Nigan.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the new teacher certification for Renee Nigan. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries.
I move that we approve the alternate authorization for pupil service staff, Heather Howard.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the authorization for pupil service staff of Heather Howard. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries.
I move to approve the alternate authorization content specialist for William
Capadagli.
Capadagli.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve content or authorization for content specialist William Capadagli. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries.
Move to approve the alternate authorization to new certification for Robert Griffin.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the alternate authorization teacher to certification, Robert Griffin. Any further discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries.
Move alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Kelly Kristanak.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Kelly Kristanak. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries.
I move to approve the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Ezra Stafford.
I second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Ezra Stafford. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries.
I move the alternate authorization teacher to new certification for Jill Engel.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the authorization teacher to new certification for Jill Engel. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Thank you. Next, we have here the calendar change, Board of Trustee meeting schedule, and will be presented by our superintendent.
All right, so this is relatively easy switch up here. And the November 12th date is a Monday, so usually we meet on Tuesdays, obviously. And we're changing it due to the fact that we'll be at the ISBA conference, many of us. And then due to recent legislation and the changes in trustee elections, the annual meeting will now be in January opposed to July.
Okay, thank you very much. We probably should do it separately. We'll do the first one, the change of the trustee meeting in November. We're moving it from a Tuesday to a Monday because of the ISBA meeting that we're going to have.
Okay. Move to change the meeting date for the annual meeting to, the November 12th meeting from 13th to 12th.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we approve the change of the trustee meeting as stated in the motion. Any questions about that? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. The next has to do with calendar changes regarding early release in June.
still have the annual
You
meeting.
pulled these out separately, I'm not sure.
Oh, we had the other one on the
Yeah, the-
annual meeting.
I'll make a motion that we approve the January 8th as our annual meeting based on legislative changes.
Second that.
It's been moved and seconded that we change our annual meeting to January 8th because of new legislation. Any discussion on that? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Next, we have a calendar change.
Okay, so June 6th was listed as an early release day for Southpoint High School and LPOHS, and both principals have asked that those days be changed back just to a regular day. So that's all that is.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion to approve that change.
I'll make a motion for the calendar change to the 2018-19 school year by changing SHS and LPOHS early release on June 6th to a regular day.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we make that calendar change as just stated in the motion. Any question?
Yeah, I did have a question.
Sure.
What prompted that, just getting
So,
hours in?
so that's a Thursday. So it's the second to the last day of school. And so the Wednesday, we still have an early release Wednesday
Oh.
as far as PLC, but that Thursday,
Now you're just putting it through.
we revamped our final exam schedule. So we
Okay.
no longer need to get out early multiple times. We would rather
Okay.
have a full day of school on that Thursday. And then the Friday, the last day is early.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Any further discussion?
No?
All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Next, we have the consent agenda.
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
I second.
It's moved and seconded that we approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, that motion carries. Thank you. Now we're back to information items. For the board, we have the first reading of policy. Kelly, do you want to go over those?
Yes, so I'll just go over, we have 3 because of the new legislation that's been passed for the annual meeting. I know we just looked at all these policies actually, but on policy 1110 election, we've just moved from the 3rd Tuesday following the first Monday in November now. So it's going to be in that second paragraph there, the first Tuesday following the first Monday in November is when the elections will occur. Any questions on that? Okay. Moving on to the next policy is taking office, policy 1120. And in the second paragraph, we're just changing taking office in July 1 to January 1. And that is the only change on that policy. Any questions?
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board on those changes?
No, there's more.
Okay. And the board just needs to be made aware of the procedure, but I've included procedure 1120. Same, I'm just trying to keep the wording the same in that. However, I missed its fourth paragraph down. A trustee holds office from January 1, and it needs to say, thanks to Trustee Decker, it needs to say a trustee holds office from January 1 in the year after he or she was elected until January 1. And I didn't catch those mistakes.
Yeah.
And then down I've just changed July to January. And then under the list of reasons why a trustee could be appointed, under item 3, Trustee Decker also pointed out it needs to state removes himself or herself from the trustee zones, and I will make those edits at second reading.
Okay, very good.
She got those from the state. I knew that as soon as I saw them. They just copied the same thing they'd done before.
Any other comments?
Changed
or
the
any
dates
other-
without looking at how that impacted.
Yeah.
And
Okay,
then
and 1200.
okay, and 1200, again, we're just moving some dates. So I've changed the wording or the month from May to November, and also changed it to say annual instead of regular, and January again instead of July for the annual meeting. And then also, if you can see down under the lists of regular business at annual meetings, and the state is now requiring a review of the code of ethics. And so that will be an addition to 1200, and that concludes the updates to those policies.
Okay, very good. Any questions from the board?
No, those are easy.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, announcements. Superintendent, do you have any?
Yeah, I have some really exciting news from the state. I've sent you some information about the new accountability system the state is using for student performance, which I think is great, a long time coming. I just wanted to share quickly what we found out about our schools. And so they came out with what they called a top performer list, of which very few schools made that list. So I'll start, we heard about this last week, but I want to share it one more time. We had our alternative high school, LPOHS, their grad rate, they only recognized 3 alternative schools in the state of Idaho out of 44. Lake Pend High School was the top performing school when it came to grad rate. They also recognized K-8 schools. They didn't separate elementary out of the middle schools because there are some K-8 schools in the state of Idaho. For English language arts achievement, they recognized 47 schools out of 490. So that's very few schools got recognized. Washington Elementary School and Northside were 2 of the highest performing schools in the state out of elementary and also middle school. So that was fantastic. They were both in the 95th percentile, so almost at the very, very top. So that was really impressive. That is also in spite of really for our district, lower poverty rate, but for the state, it's still relatively high. It's close to 40%. So when you think that they're 2 of the highest performing schools, and what we know is great teaching trumps poverty every time. So that was fantastic. Also, for English language arts growth, only 44 schools out of almost 500 were recognized. Washington Elementary, Northside Elementary, and Hope Elementary, which I thought was just fantastic. And we were so pleased for that. The second area that they recognized schools were in the area of goal makers. So basically, I'm going to talk a little bit more about this at the next board meeting when we go over our metrics that we are setting for our 5-year plan. But for goal makers, basically, they recognize schools that reached their interim target. So they want, over the next 6 years, the state wants to reduce by 1/3 the percentage of students who are not proficient or not graduating, etc. So we had a lot of schools that made the goal makers list. K-8 schools, out of about 500 schools, only 158 were recognized. Sandpoint Middle School, Washington Elementary, Northside Elementary, Hope, and Southside for the English language arts. For mathematics, they recognized Washington, Northside, and Hope once again. And then for high schools, for English language arts, Sandpoint High School and Clark Fork High School were recognized. Only 72 of 170 schools are recognized. And finally, both Sandpoint High School and Clark Fork High School met their goal when it came to graduation rates as well. The next thing that will come out, and I'll share an announcement at the next meeting about this, they're going to also have some subcategories recognized, which I'm very interested in taking a look at that as well. They're a little bit slow rolling out some of these things because it's the first year. They won't be done rolling out all of the metrics until December. So I'll keep you up to speed as we find out more.
Great. Are you going to mention this at the breakfast to the staff?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Because
exciting.
it's really great. They really, really terrific.
Yeah, we're very
I'm really
pleased.
proud of all the
Mr.
schools.
Chairman,
Yes, Gary?
for Superintendent Woodward, I mean, what metrics is the state using, to establish these lists?
They use the ISAT exam, the summative assessment at the end of the year.
What about for high school? I mean, high school students only take the ISAT, what?
They're using the ISAT for that as well, yes. Yeah, it's during the years that they actually take the exam. Yeah.
Well, very good.
Yeah.
Any other announcements?
No.
Any announcements from the board? Okay, well,
Administrator, Tom, you have one administrator.
okay.
Just looking forward, teachers coming tomorrow. They've been in working already ahead of time, and tomorrow evening, our parent support group CARE is doing a barbecue for the new freshmen and the new students, and then we're going to have an orientation, and our staff will be working tomorrow evening so that the new freshmen can meet their teachers and follow their schedule around. And kind of, we just started that last year. We find that it kind of really alleviates the anxiety of the first day of school, meeting the teacher for the first time. So I'm proud of the staff for taking that on. So
Great.
looking forward to the year.
Great. Any other comments before we adjourn? Okay, thank you all very much.